Imagine waking up in a world without Facebook, without Twitter, without Instagram, without TikTok, or even YouTube. No endless scrolling, no likes, no followers, no instant viral videos that can change a person's life overnight. It sounds almost impossible because for most of us, social media feels as natural as electricity, as unavoidable as the weather. But what if it had never been invented at all? In this alternate reality, humanity enters the 21st century with the internet, but without the platforms that shape culture, politics, and communication. We still have email, we still have basic websites, we even have online shopping. But what disappears is the massive web of instant connectivity between billions of people across the globe. No influencers, no hashtags, no viral challenges uniting people across continents. Instead, communication remains slower, less centralized, and far more controlled by television, newspapers, and radio. Think about it. No Facebook means no endless political debates in your feed. No Twitter means no presidents or celebrities using 280 characters to shift global conversations. No TikTok means no wave of dances, memes, or trends spreading across schools in a single afternoon. The absence of these platforms reshapes how people consume information, form opinions, and even how they see themselves. Some things might actually feel calmer. Without the constant flood of notifications, our attention spans may be longer, our evenings quieter. But at the same time, the speed at which information spreads would be dramatically slower. A breaking news story might take hours or even days to reach the public. Movements that depend on viral momentum, protests, social campaigns, grassroots activism, would struggle to get off the ground. In this world, we are connected by the internet, but isolated in ways we cannot imagine today. It is a quieter, less chaotic reality, but is it also a less democratic one? That's the question this journey will try to answer. To understand a world without social media, we have to travel back to the internet's earliest days. Picture the 1990s, dial-up connections, bulky desktop computers, and the screeching sound of modems. The internet existed, but it was nothing like the endless feeds and notifications we know today. Instead, it was a digital library filled with static websites, message boards, and chat rooms. Without social media platforms, this early version of the web would remain the norm for much longer. People searching for information would rely on portals like Yahoo or early search engines, navigating through text-heavy sites. Interaction would be limited to email exchanges, private forums, or instant messaging apps like AIM and MSN. There would be no global platforms where a single post could reach millions in seconds. This means that culture in the 1990s and early 2000s would have developed at a slower pace. Instead of memes spreading across continents, humor and trends would remain local. A joke told in a college forum might never escape that circle. A band promoting their music online might reach a handful of fans through their personal website, but they would not become overnight sensations without platforms like MySpace or YouTube. Traditional media, television, radio, and newspapers would continue to dominate far longer. In fact, without social media, they might still hold the monopoly on mass communication even today. The voices of ordinary people would rarely be amplified beyond their local communities. News would be filtered through editors, anchors in established institutions, rather than through the chaotic swarm of posts and retweets. On one hand, this could mean fewer conspiracy theories and less misinformation. After all, false stories would not have the same viral pathways to spread unchecked. But it would also mean fewer opportunities for ordinary people to challenge authority. Movements like the Arab Spring, which depended on Twitter and Facebook, may never have happened. The early internet without social media is like a vast but quiet library, full of information, but lacking the human noise, connection, and chaos. That turned it into the digital town square we know today. It was informative, yes, but far less interactive. Politics without social media would be unrecognizable compared to today's world. Think of how leaders communicate now. Twitter threads from presidents, Instagram posts from prime ministers, TikTok campaigns from younger politicians. In our reality, a single tweet can shift markets, spark outrage, or even influence an election. But in a world without social media, that direct line between politicians and the public does not exist. Instead, communication remains filtered through traditional channels. Speeches are delivered on television, debates are covered by newspapers, and official statements reach the public through press conferences. This gives politicians less immediate influence, but also less risk of saying something that could backfire instantly online. Political messaging becomes slower, more calculated, and less reactive to public mood swings. Movements and protests would look very different. The Arab Spring, which was coordinated through Facebook and Twitter, might never have occurred. The Black Lives Matter movement, amplified through hashtags and viral videos, could have remained local protests rather than global calls for justice. Social media has provided a megaphone for grassroots movements, and without it, the voices of marginalized groups would have had fewer ways to reach the world. At the same time, societies may be less polarized. Without algorithms feeding users extreme content to keep them engaged, echo chambers might not form so intensely. People would still disagree, but the rapid radicalization that comes from being trapped in online bubbles might not exist. Elections might be calmer, news cycles slower, and political scandals less explosive. International relations would also shift. Leaders like Donald Trump, who used Twitter as a personal broadcast channel, would never have risen in the same way. World leaders would remain more distant figures, their power filtered through institutions rather than their personal accounts. In short, without social media, politics might be slower, less chaotic, and less dramatic, but also less democratic. The ability for ordinary citizens to demand change directly, instantly, and loudly would be severely limited. For younger generations, a world without social media would be almost unimaginable. Today, teenagers grow up with Instagram shaping their self-image, TikTok shaping their sense of humor, and YouTube shaping their knowledge. But without these platforms, youth culture would evolve in completely different ways. In this alternate reality, trends would spread slowly, often limited to local communities. Fashion would rely more on magazines, television shows, and music videos, rather than influencers showcasing daily outfits online. Music discoveries would happen through radio stations, CDs, or word of mouth, not through a 15-second viral TikTok sound. Instead of everyone knowing the same dances and jokes, different regions might have their own unique styles, creating a much more fragmented global culture. The influencer economy simply wouldn't exist. No Instagram stars, no TikTok dancers, no YouTubers making millions from ad revenue. Young people would still dream of fame, but that fame would remain tied to Hollywood, sports, or the music industry, not to an algorithm that could turn an unknown teenager into a global star overnight. For many, this would mean fewer opportunities to break through socioeconomic barriers, since fame and wealth would stay concentrated among traditional elites. On the other hand, mental health among teenagers might look very different. Without constant exposure to curated highlight reels of other people's lives, there might be less comparison, less anxiety, and less pressure to look perfect all the time. Cyberbullying would still exist, but at a smaller scale, mostly limited to forums or chat rooms. Cultural activism would also be harder. Hashtags like #MeToo, which allowed survivors to find solidarity and amplify their voices, might never gain traction. Social change would still happen, but at a slower pace, relying more heavily on traditional media coverage rather than grassroots momentum. In short, without social media, youth culture would be more local, less synchronized, and less connected globally. It might also be healthier in some ways, but it would lose the global voice that today's younger generations take for granted. The global economy would look strikingly different without social media. Today, platforms like Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok are not just communication tools. They are massive advertising ecosystems worth hundreds of billions of dollars. Companies big and small rely on targeted ads and influencer marketing to reach customers. Without these platforms, the entire structure of modern business would shift. For one, digital advertising would remain basic. Companies might still place banners on websites or ads on search engines. But the powerful precision of targeting audiences based on their interests, behavior, and personal data would never exist. Marketing would remain closer to the old model. TV commercials, billboards, magazine spreads, and radio spots dominating the landscape. Online businesses would grow more slowly because reaching customers would be more expensive and less efficient. Small businesses in particular would struggle. In our reality, social media gives entrepreneurs the ability to launch products with little more than a viral post. Handmade jewelry, independent fashion, niche gadgets, all can find audiences through Instagram or TikTok. Without social platforms, those businesses would have to fight for shelf space in physical stores or pay for costly advertising in traditional media, leaving less room for innovation and grassroots growth. The absence of social media would also mean the absence of some of today's largest corporations. Meta, TikTok's parent company, ByteDance, even YouTube as part of Google's empire, none would have risen to their current size. Instead, older tech giants like Microsoft or IBM might dominate the digital space, while television networks and print publishers would remain powerful. On the flip side, industries threatened by social media might still thrive. Traditional journalism could have held on to more advertising revenue. Cable television might remain strong. Record labels and movie studios might wield even greater control over entertainment. But innovation would slow. Viral marketing has not only fueled consumer culture, but also accelerated adoption of technologies, from smartphones to electric cars. Without social platforms pushing trends, new ideas and products would spread far more slowly. In this alternate world, business is less democratized, less dynamic, and more controlled by the few rather than the many. One of the most overlooked consequences of social media's rise has been its role in driving technological innovation. Without Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, or TikTok, many of the tools and industries we take for granted today would either not exist or would have developed decades later. Consider data. Social media created the demand for big data systems, capable of storing, analyzing, and monetizing the behavior of billions of users. Entire industries around cloud computing, data analytics, and targeted artificial intelligence grew out of the need to understand clicks, likes, and shares. In a world without social platforms, the urgency for such technologies would be far smaller. I might remain a niche academic field, advancing slowly, without the massive rivers of social data to train it. Smartphones would also evolve differently. A huge part of the smartphone revolution was fueled by apps like Facebook, Instagram, and Snapchat that demanded better cameras, faster processors, and constant internet connectivity. Without the incentive of posting photos and videos instantly to social networks, the pressure on companies like Apple and Samsung to innovate might have been weaker. We might still be using simpler phones, with less emphasis on high-resolution cameras or lightning-fast internet speeds. Streaming and entertainment industries would shift too. YouTube, for example, helped normalize video streaming long before Netflix dominated. In this alternate timeline, streaming might develop slower, and video content could remain tied to traditional TV networks rather than independent creators. Even e-commerce would feel the absence. Today, much of online shopping is driven by influencers, product reviews on YouTube, or TikTok must-have trends. Without these platforms, consumer discovery would be more limited, and online sales would grow at a slower pace. In short, the absence of social media would not just remove a form of communication, it would reshape the trajectory of entire industries. Innovation would arrive more cautiously, driven by corporations and universities, rather than the chaotic, viral energy of billions of online users. One of the most hotly debated aspects of social media is its impact on mental health. Without platforms like Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok, the psychological landscape of society might look very different. In our reality, social media exposes people, especially teenagers, to a constant stream of curated lives. Perfect vacations, flawless selfies, and highlight reels create unrealistic standards that fuel anxiety, depression, and low self-esteem. Without these endless comparisons, people might feel less pressure to live up to an impossible ideal. Daily life would still include stress from work, school, and relationships, but the additional burden of online performance would be gone. Cyberbullying would also be less pervasive. In the world we know, harassment can go viral, magnified by retweets and comments from strangers across the globe. Without social networks, bullying would remain more local, confined to schools, workplaces, or small online forums. The scale of harm would be smaller, and victims would not face the same level of global exposure. On the other hand, social media has provided vital spaces for connection. People struggling with loneliness, illness, or minority identities have found support communities online that may not exist in their physical surroundings. Without these digital lifelines, many individuals might feel more isolated. A young person in a small town, for example, might never discover others who share their experiences or challenges. Awareness campaigns would also struggle. Movements like #BellLet'sTalk or #World Mental Health Day spread resources and normalize conversations about mental health. Without hashtags and viral sharing, discussions might remain stigmatized for far longer. So, while society without social media might avoid some of the mental health pitfalls of constant comparison and online toxicity, it would also lose a powerful tool for empathy, awareness, and collective healing. The absence of social platforms would create a quieter mind for some, but perhaps a lonelier world for many. As we close this thought experiment, it's clear that a world without social media would be both familiar and unrecognizable. The internet would still exist, but it would remain a quieter place, a vast library instead of a buzzing town square. Communication would be slower, culture more localized, and innovation more cautious. Without social platforms, politics would be less explosive, but also less democratic. Movements like the Arab Spring or Black Lives Matter might never break through. Youth culture would be less global, with fewer shared trends and memes. The economy would stay concentrated in the hands of traditional corporations, while small businesses and independent creators would lose their greatest tool for growth. Technology itself, from smartphones to artificial intelligence, would advance at a slower pace. And while society might avoid the anxiety and toxicity of online comparison, it would also forfeit the solidarity and awareness that only digital communities can provide. So, was social media a blessing or a curse? The answer, as with most human inventions, lies somewhere in between. It has given us unprecedented access to information, connection, and creativity. But it has also brought polarization, misinformation, and mental health struggles. A world without it might be calmer, but it would also be lonelier, less innovative, and less connected. The deeper truth is that social media reflects us, our desires, our fears, our need for attention and community. Without it, we would find other ways to connect, argue, entertain, and divide ourselves. Human nature doesn't disappear with technology. It simply adapts to new tools. So the question isn't just, what if social media was never invented? It's also, what are we going to do with it now that it exists? The future will not be shaped by whether social platforms exist, but by how we choose to use them.